Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Pitching to the Buyer, the fifth of the 6 Appetite for Angus get-togethers. It's great to have you all with us this evening. I hope you're going to find this really useful. What we're going to cover today is we're going to look at some 60-second pitches and hear from you, so thank you for that. And then we're going to look at, how you perfect your pitch. What sort of things should you involve in that pitch? And that could be pitching face-to-face, or it could be pitching online. So we're going to cover that as well. And then we're going to look at a bit at negotiation, some of the do's and don'ts, and give you some hints and tips around how to get the best deal and negotiate to your best capability. And then we're going to open up the floor and we're going to share our ideas, maybe do a revised pitch or two, and really sort of get into some good Q&A around the table tonight. So thank you to those that have already pitched and given us some examples of their pitches. We really appreciate that. Just looking at the slide there, what's the common thread amongst all those photos you see in front of you on the screen? Okay, so yeah, everyone is standing in what they call the power pose.
And doing this 60 seconds or so actually has been proven to reduce cortisol, raise testosterone, and improve confidence, lowering stress. So this is what we should all be doing, guys, before we go into a pitch. Now, when Callum and I have done this face-to-face with 60 people in Inverness was the last time we did this at the Anne Loughran facility. We did this exercise. We had everybody standing up and doing this power pose. Anybody fancy doing that? You might need to switch your cameras off if you've got your joggers on. Are we gonna try it? Right. If cameras off, let's all stand up for 60 seconds and do that power pose. All right. Put those shoulders down, back. Feel really powerful. Sophie, you've been so brave keeping that camera on. That's because it's going to turn out. I can't because I'm from the bottom down. I look dreadful. Callum, you'll need to tell me when 60 minutes is up. All I can see is my reflection in my window.
60 minutes of fire posing. Love it.
Right. Camera's on again.
That's my daily laughter.
Can't get my camera. Oh, right. How do you? Did anyone actually do that? Did everyone do that? I'm not sure. There's some people looking in very similar positions they were looking in 2 minutes ago. Brilliant. How did that make you feel? Did it break the ice?
It's kind of woken me up a wee bit. Week.
Yeah, good. It's supposed to that sort of just that pose to get you sort of set, all thinking that, and so that's how we should all be preparing however we're going to pitch, really. But we thought we'd add, normally that's what you do before you go into a buyer's office. That's sometimes what I would do before a supplier came in, because if I knew the supplier, I might have needed the energy as well. But we've added in a slide, or Callum has added in a slide, which I think is really important as well. So before we get into sort of the structure of a good pitch, I'm just going to ask Callum to run through a slide on pitching digitally, because we're all in this digital era. So over to you, Callum.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kerry. I think just sort of rewinding there back to the power pose, it's one of these things that standing up and getting into that strong, powerful position does help your confidence. It really does. And I mean, I remember before I got this job, that was the first thing that I almost did before I went into the interview. Yeah, Kerry's laughing, casting our minds back, but just helping yourself to not only relax yourself but just give you the confidence, which is really important. But anyway, I'm just going to sort of start off by talking about pitching digitally. Now I know that I'm usually quite quiet on these sessions. I usually sit behind the scenes and do the sort of technical stuff. But this, for me, is quite important, because the current world that we're living in, you may, if you haven't already, You may be in a situation where you're asked or you have to pitch to potential buyers digitally over screen rather than doing it face to face. Now, throughout lockdown, we've all had to sort of brush up on our digital skills. So when we've been using Zoom, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, among other platforms to communicate with friends, family, and for business. But have you ever actually thought about how you present yourself on screen? And that's something that had never really triggered in my mind is, how do you look? How do you come across? How do you communicate? And it's something that for me is really important, particularly if you're asked to pitch digitally in the future. So I guess here's some of our sort of top tips, if you like. And the first one I'd like to touch on is your background. Now, your background in terms of when you're presenting or pitching digitally, lockdown's given us a unique insight into each other's homes, into each other's personal lives, and also like the wonderful array of bookshelves that we all seem to have in our homes. I don't know about you, but when I meet someone for the first time, or someone that I don't necessarily speak to very often, the first thing that I look at is their background. What's going on in their house? What's what's on that shelf over there? Look at the size of that TV. My attention is not on the person speaking. So from the beginning, you really want your buyer to be focused on you and only you, okay? Not what's going on in the background. So find somewhere in your house or office where there are no distractions. There's no children running around. There's no dogs. There's nothing that could potentially distract your buyer. Try to use, if you can, a neutral background or like a minimalistic background. Something that's, I guess, white or clear or, a sort of neutral color. So it stops the buyer's attention being sort of straying away from you, because that effectively should be what they're interested in. Now, a lot of these platforms, you can use like a set background, so you can upload like an image. I guess if you're using an image, try to make it relevant. So I guess you could use your branding, you could maybe use a few products or images of products, or use an appropriate image that tells a story about your brand. And I'm just looking, I know that we've got Ogilvy, right? And I'm sure you guys have probably got backgrounds that you use, but as an example, if it was an image of, say, like, a field of potatoes, or it could be a tractor and trailer or something that tells a story, rather than, sitting, and I know you guys are not there, but, sitting in your busy kitchen and your other half's trying to like make something and it's all going horribly wrong, okay? So just think about how to use your space that's around you or virtually around you to greatest effect. The second point is standing versus sitting. Now, this is an interesting one. Similar to the power pose that we've all done, presenting yourself digitally, standing up instantly gives you more confidence. It allows you to project your voice and also helps you to breathe more easily, particularly if you're nervous. You're less likely to slouch, be hunched, or fidget standing up. But this, standing up may feel a little bit unnatural for the majority of us, particularly, as we've spent pretty much the past year on video calls sitting down. But I would recommend, if you're going to try it, the next time you go onto one of these calls, try standing up and see how you feel. I guess it's up to you. If you feel more confident standing up or sitting down, do what works best for you. But from people I've spoken to, in terms of pitching and making a really good impression and doing that power pose is easiest and best to do it standing up. Embracing the pause. We all get nervous. Okay, it's okay to get nervous. It's good to get nervous. When we're presenting, digitally, it's very, very easy to start talking very, very fast continuously without taking a break. And that just sounds really muffled. It's not clear. And if you start talking really quickly, or if you've got a tendency to talk quickly, this is amplified when we present digitally. So try and be conscious about the speed that you're talking, and try and take regular pauses. Taking regular pauses as you're speaking, it helps to calm yourself, and it also helps you to deliver a more powerful and memorable pitch. And I guess it's quality, not quantity. So when you're delivering your pitch, and I know Kerry's going to go into more detail, you'll probably have a limited time. So it's the quality of what you say in that time that's important, not how much you say. So I guess plan exactly what key points and messages you want to tell. The buyer at the other end, they probably don't have the time, and they probably don't really want to hear your whole life story as much as it's interesting. They want to hear the key messages about your product and brand, of what's important to them. Using a pause where there's a clear silence actually helps to regain attention. So if you find yourself talking a lot and talking, quite quickly, and you can see your buyer starting to lose attention, just stop. Take a pause, and instantly I've seen all your eyes prick up because I've stopped talking. Something's changed, the dynamics changed. So what's happening? Okay, so that's something to consider, is if you do find yourself just talking, just take a little break, take a little pause, and then continue. Eye contact. Maintaining eye contact is probably one of the most important elements of your pitch when you're presenting digitally. There's nothing worse than looking at the top of someone's head. So if I was to talk like that for 10 minutes, like very quickly, you're going to get switched off. So, don't, if you are planning to use notes, and I would recommend using notes, there is a very sort of handy tip that I've started doing. Use your screen to your full advantage. Your buyer can only see you and your surroundings. They can't see what's on your screen. So they can't see what you're looking at unless, of course, you're screen sharing. So I would recommend typing up your notes. Actually have them on the screen. Have them on the screen minimized or reduced in size so that you can partly see your buyer or audience, and you can also see your notes. This way you don't need to look down, and your eye contact remains forward, looking at the screen. Another thing to consider is if you're using two screens. So if your webcam's on screen 1, but the whole time you're sitting looking at screen 2, that it's not great for someone that's watching. And as a potential buyer, as much as your products could be excellent and fantastic, that experience is going to leave them with a bad impression. Now, I don't know if you guys can tell, but this whole time that I'm speaking to you at the moment, I'm actually looking at my notes. You guys are about 10% of my screen at the moment, and the remainder of my screen is all my notes. But hopefully you can't tell. I don't know, I'd like to know if you could tell, if you can see my eyes moving, but it's just that I wanted to demonstrate that I'm actually looking at my notes right now. And hopefully you can't tell. Planning and preparing. I'm going to look at screen 2, screen 1, screen 2. Plan and prepare. As I say, you're likely to have limited time with your buyer, so plan exactly what you want to say. The time that you spend planning and preparing will make your pitch go really smoothly. You'll know it inside out, and there won't be any stuttering or stumbles. And I guess that's also the benefit of using notes, is you've got it there, so it's hopefully very fluent. And practicing. I guess one of the most valuable things you can do is to practice. Record yourself and watch yourself back. as cringy, as absolutely cringy as this may feel, it's by far the best way to get instant feedback on the way that you look, the way that you communicate, the speed at which you talk, and also your use of pauses throughout. And I guess it's one of these things when you record yourself and you watch yourself back, you're like, do I really do that? Do I really look like that? And I didn't realize when we started doing these video calls, like at the start of lockdown, and there was a session that was being recorded, and the whole session I was talking at the screen like this. And it was only when I looked back and I thought, get your hand away from your face. What are you doing? And it was only just that experience of that recording and watching myself back that you then realize what you do well, but also what you can improve on. So before you do go into, you know, pitching with a buyer, is record yourself. You know, it's very, very valuable. And my final point is start and finish with a bang. I read just recently, this is quite funny, a virtual presentation is a bit like a plane journey. So you remember the beginning when you take off, and you remember the end when you touch down. But you don't really, the middle bit is a bit sort of, you don't really remember what happens, it's a bit of a blur. So when you are doing, you know, if you're doing your pitch, that's why I guess it's important, if you're going to prioritize any parts of your pitch, it should be at the beginning and at the end. So the hook, as Kerry, I don't want to spoil the show, but the hook at the start to attract attention and first impressions really helps to gather momentum. It's the thing that's like, wow, here's the start, you know, here we're here to find out about Ogilvy. It's like captured my attention. Here we go. The middle bit, I'm sure is very interesting, but I've just had 3 messages and my kids are screaming out the back. So that's fine. And then I remember the end. Okay, great. I want to find out more. So I guess it's that start piece and also your closing remarks. Try and make it as memorable for good reasons as possible. Leave your buyer hopefully feeling inspired and eager to find out more. So if you're going to take anything away from tonight, start and finish is like a plane journey. And on that note, I'm going to hand back over to Kerry.
Thank you very much, Callum. And if you could put on the next slide, please, that would be great. And some real synergy here with a traditional pitch, but a traditional pitch will work digitally. Some very things that you do in conjunction. That's really useful. Thank you. So perfecting your pitch. There's usually about 8 parts to a pitch. You can fit these in 60 seconds. You need to start with a hook. You need to attract attention. It can be provocative. It's got to have impact. It could initiate an emotional response, but it demonstrates opinion. Not just any opinion, but a well-founded, market-driven opinion. Now, out of all the pitches we had a few minutes ago, John was the only one that had a hook in there, and that was about plastics. Okay, I would have turned that around a bit and said, I'm going to make up some figures. Did you know that 50% of the UK consuming population want to get rid of plastic? Hook, straight away, hooked. Statement, it's emotional, it's strong, it's opinion, but it's a well-founded, well-grounded opinion, and it has impact. Okay. The next thing you need to think about, well, what's the problem? What is the problem that your product is trying to solve? Who are you aiming it at? What's the market reason for it? How is your product going to help this? So it's straight away there, you could have something like, did you know that 70% of hospitality outlets are looking to have sustainable packaging? If you're pitching, say, to the wholesaler or something. Or did you know that the growth in craft spirits is X? And in Scotland particularly, they are, and you start to think about the problem you're trying to solve, because that's where your product comes in. And the solution, very briefly demonstrate why your product is the solution to this problem. Why it's feasible, If they list it, what would the outcomes be? So then you could bring in some terms of how fast it's selling, what you'd expect it to sell, you know, just some bits and pieces. You've only got 60 seconds or maybe a couple of minutes. Let's think about, you've probably got about 5 minutes usually, but think about the key nuggets of information that's going to want to make this buyer buy your product, list your product, stock your product, keep your product on their shelves. Your solution's got to be innovative. There's no point in being a me too, been there, done that. Think about the innovative, the USP, the story, the why, and create that interest in your product. Make your product interesting. And the thing to remember there is, at this point, is, you know, you're used to dealing with your product. You deal with your product day in, day out. How's another person going to see your product? You bring your knowledge you have on your product, your business, the ethics, the culture, the environment, the family story, whatever it may be, and think about how that person, why is that important to that buyer? You might be pitching to a buyer for whom, you know, it's all about family products, local food, ethical ways of production, sustainable packaging, sustainable prices. You need to know that already. We've talked about that before, but then that's where you start to, your product can be a solution to their needs. Now, you're going to have to think about money. You'll already have prepared. We're going to do a little bit about negotiation later on. You'll already have done your homework. You know, Callum mentioned plan and prepare. We've talked about it at previous webinars. You need to know the deal, you know, what you're going to be selling it at, how much money that's going to make them, whether that be percentage or cash, whichever plays to the strengths you need to highlight. What's important to them. You're going to have done some background about what they expect. So you're going to have to put something in there about money. And then you might want to think about, okay, because this, you might be a small person, a small buyer wanting to scale up your product. Then what's the scalability issues? If you're going from selling through a farm shop to, say, selling to one of the discounters or the smaller supermarkets, and you've got to demonstrate that, well, okay, at the moment this is this, it normally retails at this. Should we be talking scale of this? Then we'd be thinking about a price like this. That would give you a margin of this. With a turnover of X number moving off the shelf, that will give you a profit or a cash margin of an X per week. So you've got the information on the prices, the money bit, down to absolute T. You know it. In the money piece, you can also bring in the market size. You might want to introduce there about the proportion of the gin market that craft gin has, and potentially, if you've got the figures, the proportion your product has. If you don't, then your product is growing at X percentage in the year on year, and that gives you, and you start to sort of fit your product into that growth sector of the market. You'll need to have thought a little bit about risk, okay? So you might need to mention the competition. You might need to mention IP, intellectual property, or production, supply chain, distribution. Start to think, what are the things the buyer's going to start picking up? Is he going to be worried I can't supply him if he puts a big order in? Is he going to be worried I can't get my production turned around quick enough? So you're going to have to think about the risks that would be in the buyer's mind, and start to make sure you've got them. If they, head them off at the pass by putting them in your pitch, but be ready to answer any questions on that. Don't introduce an issue at this point. If you feel yourself you're a bit worried about distribution, don't come in like, oh, well, we thought we'd have a problem with distribution, but we're not going to have, because you're introducing a weakness. So you don't want to do that, but be ready, have that information, that thought to hand. For those of you who have a really good family story, whether it's based on the farm, whether it's, your work is a family business, you work with your husband, your sister, whatever, people have said that tonight, talk about the team. Demonstrate that it's not just you, because a buyer doesn't want to know it's just one person. That's a bit scary, okay? So what about the team? Who's the team behind the product? A bit about the skills, their experience. You know, have any of them had any recognition? Have you won any awards? Those sorts of things. You can sneak those into your pitch. Really useful, really good. And you need to think about how you're going to demonstrate that you've got traction. You know, what have you done? What are you doing to get traction for this product? You know, you'll bring in here sort of the customer base you're working with, not giving anything confidential away, but the customer base you're working with, how you interact with them, how you interact with the end consumer, funding, social media activities you're doing to support your product, you know, to make sure that you're creating the demand that will pull your product through the store. Think about those things and have any stats you might have to validate. So examples, you don't need to name the example you might say at the moment, we're in 10 farm shops and we have grown our sales IX, we've scaled the product, we've supported it with this. It might be tastings, it might be social media, it might be events, whatever it may be. So think about the traction you've created around your product. So you are demonstrating that you are really behind this product. You know, when I was a buyer, I used to get people that owned companies coming in and selling to me. Great, fantastic. You knew their heart was in it. Then you'd get a sales broker coming in and they'd be there with, I mean, we're talking the 1980s, but he'd be there with a folder of 10 different products. How could he be supporting all of those products? Now, I know sometimes we have to use that, but think about how the buyer is going to feel. Okay, it's really, really important that your enthusiasm, your passion, but well-founded, good business, sensible passion, not just emotion. You know, it's a balance. And then you've got to ask, you've got to end with an ask. What do you want the buyer to do? This is that big bang that Callum was talking about. What action do you want the buyer to take? So end with an ask, because that will progress the conversation. Does that make sense to anybody? Before I go on to the next slide, has anybody got any thoughts on that? Any questions? It depends who you're promoting to, and I can't remember the logistics of how the expo is going to work, but you need, if you're trying to get into, say, a deli, right, a deli in Stonehaven, right, you need to actually understand what that deli is currently selling. So if you look at Granger's in Stonehaven, you know, they've got a range of stuff. They don't tend to focus on Scottish. They leave that to other stores in Stonehaven. But you need to demonstrate that you've actually looked at the stores. You understand what that buyer's outlets are like, whether it be retail or hospitality or food service, whatever, you know, but you need to demonstrate that. So it might well be, if you are looking to pitch to a supermarket, you're looking to pitch in, and please do, like, Fiona, come in here if you've recently been doing this, but you know, you might have a lead product that you want to get in there, or you might have a couple of products you want to get in there. It really depends who you're pitching to. If it's a supermarket and you're looking at pitching, let me think about, say, a canned product or something, then you're going to have to understand how the canned fixture works. You know, they'll have X number of facings for a product and where it goes. So, you know, one tiny little product is going to get lost unless you've got a good USP, a good story, a good reason for it to be given the right space on the shelf. So what will be difficult with the expo is if people are doing one video for every different type of buyer, because you really do need to understand what type of buyer you're pitching to and about their you know, their outlet, that what they're representing. Does anybody want to add to that? Because there are other people that could add to that. Does anyone want to add to the comments and answer that question?
I don't think we were always trained to do. So just from my background of kind of more FMCG, kind of big business training, it was always before you went to see any buyer, if you hadn't walked one of their stores, at least one of their stores. And places like Tesco head office, you knew which store the buyer would focus his time in and probably did his weekly shopping. So you would spend, we would always arrive a good hour and a half before we needed to be at that meeting, so that you could go around the most local stores to the head office, really familiarise yourself with what was going on, and then you can talk kind of with, you kind of know what where the buyer's head might be at as well.
Definitely.
And so, because it's easy now just to look online and look at ranges, but I think you actually have to physically get yourself, I know it's hard at the minute, but get yourself into store and have a good walk around and see what's going on.
You can still, that's absolutely spot on. I mean, I've been chucked out of Sainsbury's years and years ago for checking out my competitors' lines and see what they were stocking. And even that's important if you're going to pitch to say something, well, any supermarket or anybody, know what their competition is as well. You know what type of people walk through the door. There's no point going into you know, a sort of discount store and trying to sell a top end. I'm really going to hurt somebody at the moment. I'm desperately trying not to say the wrong thing, but you need to understand the consumer that shops in that store. You know, there's no point in pitching a product that just does not match the consumer profile. And you can find, it is hard at the moment, but you can find a lot out online. You know, you can look at the way people, the language the customers are using, your target customers are using on the websites, what they're trying to be, their ethos, their story. How does your product add to that? You can learn a heck of a lot actually off the internet. There's a lot of information out there. You just have to look at the style, what they're trying to achieve, and you can pull out the aspirations from that, the way they talk about themselves. And then the trick is there, well, actually, my product adds to that. It supports that ethos, you know. Anybody else got any thoughts on that before we, or does that make sense? So without fail, every single one of you, okay, you said your name, that's fair enough, but then you went into what your business did, what your products were. Some people added a little bit about story, which was really interesting. So name of mum's house, the farm, loved the bit about the whole process was on farm. But do you see what I'm saying? There weren't any hooks at the beginning. John, you had a hook in yours, but it was a bit further down the line. If you just started with that, did you know plastic, blah, 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 then you've given somebody a reason to listen to you straight off, because plastic's going to be an issue to everybody. Yeah? Any other questions on that pitch slide?
There is a fear that you start to sound a bit Dragon's Den and just a bit cringy. But that's the bit that really puts me off that hook thing. Because I know when I've been a buyer as well, I can sometimes find that approach, maybe it's just my style, I find it a little bit, someone's been on a training course and it just makes me almost cringe.
I think it depends how it's delivered. I really think
that's what it is. How do you make it feel natural and it doesn't feel like you're giving it the Dragon's Den pitch? Because that sometimes just makes it go, ah.
No, I watch Dragon's Den and you think, oh my God, you sounded like, you know, you're on some sort of soapbox. And I'm probably sounding like that now, so I apologize for that. But it's what you followed up with, Fiona. It's if you follow it with you make it relevant to your company. And you can be strong without being soapboxy, you know? You can be, I mean, when we were doing this, we did this with some companies in Perth. And then we did some role play. And the hook was, do you know how many animals are shot every year on farm? And it just felt like I fell over, you know, but the fact is, it's the way you say it and it's what you follow it with. So you can be shouty, cringy, like you say, but you can also be strong and humble at the same time. You know, don't apologize for what you've done. You've all worked really hard. You put your life and soul into your product and your business. You need to do the best by it. So you've got to be strong. But the hook is, the whole thing about the hook, Fiona, and I know you know this, but the whole thing about the hook is grabbing attention and then saying, we're market led, we're responding to the market because this is what we're doing. You know, there are loads of products out there that would be fairly similar to many of the products you are pitching. And it's about that, making it stand out, making somebody remember you. Does that make sense, Fiona? Yeah? Anybody else?
Is it maybe the hook may vary based on the audience? I agree.
Absolutely.
With the small group, you don't have to go overboard, you know what I mean? It can be very casual.
Your hook, you can't have one pitch that works for everybody. You're absolutely right, John. The pitch, the hook, elements of all we've gone through there will change whomever you're talking to. They'll be adapted because you'll be giving people different, buyers will have different, there'll be different outlets and they'll have different consumers and different things will appeal to them. That's why if you know that an outlet is really pushing on natural, sustainable, blah, 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 you're not going to go in, you know straight away the sort of hooks they're going to be interested in. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. It will change. It will modify. Okay. Callum, could we have the next slide? So this is a bit of a challenge. Does anybody want to do a pitch based on what we've just talked about? No, come on, somebody's got to do it. No, I'm going to be brave. Really? Maybe later. Okay, let's have a wee look at negotiation then, Callum, please. Okay. Okay, now I've tried to just pull out some key things here. And we've got this slide and another one on hints and tips. And then it's over to discussion. So we might go back to those 60-second pitches. So a bit like pitching, negotiation's a lot about preparation. Okay. So I've split it into 8 steps there. I'm now conscious about putting my hand on my face, Callum. I've split it into 8 steps. The purpose of the diagram is that whatever you do in a negotiation, before a negotiation, this is the money bit, you will know the ideal price you'd like to get for your product. But you will also, well, you should also know the limit, the absolute minimum you can get. Now we've all made mistakes here. I once had £1 million worth of frozen peas on my books as a buyer because I overbought. But it worked out. The market turned. We sorted it out, made a profit. It's a little bit scary for a while. But anyway, but we all know the limit. So, and knowing the limit is about knowing your costs, all your costs, the minimum you need to sell your product for. And where a lot of businesses fall down, especially small businesses, they don't know all the costs. They haven't added all the costs in. They've maybe forgotten about VAT. They've maybe forgotten about distribution. They've maybe forgotten that actually they need to put a little bit in there for marketing and promotion. So you need to know your own parameters. So this, I can't showing it now with my mouse. The bit between your ideal and the limit is where you're going to negotiate, somewhere along that spectrum. And equally so, the client, the buyer, is going to have an ideal they want to pay for it, and it's going to be a lot less than your limit. But they are going to have a limit that they can go a maximum they can pay for it. And that'll be based on profit margin, other deals they have on with other suppliers, what the competition is doing, what their strategy is doing, what they want to do in their range review, whole heap of stuff. For me as a buyer, I got a base salary, but then the more the better the deals were that impacted on my bottom line, that impacted on my salary at the end of the year. So it was really important to me, you know. So your client, the buyer, is going to have a limit. And the sweet spot, or the bit you're going to be talking in, is called the bargaining arena, where those two lines overlap. So your limit, their limit. Somewhere in there you will settle if you're going to do a deal. Does that make sense? Try to show it quickly. So let's think about the stages of negotiation. You need to prepare. Oh, no, thanks. So you need to prepare, and that's about being proactive. It's about that visit to the store. It's about seeing what other products are on the shelf. Well, why are they there? What's the link to them and the customers? Quite often, if you're talking to a supermarket, you're going to have to recommend something that comes out of the range. You know, you can't just say, well, reduce that facings from 8 to 4 and fit mine in there, because it's not just about the supermarket shelf, it's about the warehouse as well. So you're going to have to proactively prepare. You're going to have, you know, clear objectives. So that's the bit about the pitch. You know, where does your product fit into this range? And that's, so there's a lot of information gathering, and it's a bit about developing a strategy. What if the buyer says to you, so what about in 3 years' time? How's that, or 6 months down the line? Where do you expect that to be? And what do you expect? You know, have your strategy thought out. So this preparation is actually one of the most important things you can actually ever do, because you only get one chance. You know, there are a few buyers that came through the door in my offer, through suppliers, sorry, they would never come through the door again because they completely wasted my time. Okay, and that sounds a bit arrogant, but you know, there's a lot of people that want to sell to buyers, you know, so you've got to make your product stand out. You've got to make the most of your time. Why would you waste it by not preparing? In the negotiation, when you're sitting there with the buyer, you'll start discussing things. It's natural. You'll have a disagreement because they will want one thing and you'll want other. And it's not going to be like an argument, but the discussion is an opportunity while you're chatting away and you're discussing. It's an opportunity to learn about what the buyer's looking for. You can gather information. You can test some of your assumptions you might have made about their ranges and what drives them. So think carefully about that. Think about how you elicit, you gather information, but also think about your behavior. Don't get emotional. It's very difficult not to get emotional because this is your pride and joy. This is, you've worked, sweated tears. You might have mortgaged your house for this, whatever. But the main thing about the discussion phase with a buyer is to listen more than you talk, because by listening, you'll learn. And that's really key. And then you'll get to sort of like signaling and proposing in discussion. That's when you start recognizing signals. You might start to hear things like, well, as things stand, or in its current format. So that's a signal to think about, oh, I can explore that. I can ask some questions about that. As things stand, well, what do you mean? Could you just elaborate a little bit on that? Or in its current format, is the case size wrong? Is it looking for a mixed case? Is the bottle too tall? You know, as things stand. And then you start to get to the stage, you quite naturally move into the proposition. So you start, you start like putting things out there for the first time, like make an offer sort of thing, but propose a solution. Oh, well, what about if we started to think about this? And thank you. You start to think about actually moving on this conversation, and then you start to present your responses and you offer up variables. And this is where you can, it's called packaging, but you can bring lots of things into trade. You can think about, well, we're actively on social media, we're creating a following, we've got quite a following, we've got this, we've got that, we've got loyalty. So you start to bring things in that start to support the listing of your product. And when you're thinking about packaging, there are rules you need to think about here. It's got to be relevant to the buyer, the things you're saying. If you're talking about value add, additional things you're doing to support your product that are completely irrelevant to his outlet and his consumers, then you're wasting your time. But think creatively. What things are of interest to them? What issues do they have? What do they have problems with? Could you help solve them by delivery or a different day of delivery, a different case size, whatever it might well be? I don't know what buyer it'll be, but start to think creatively about how you package your product and what you bring with it to the negotiation. And if you start to make concessions, you need to get something back for them. You're not going to give them away for free. And when you're starting to think about offering something, always think about what it costs you, but really importantly, what's the value to them? Because you might be in the situation where making a slight change doesn't cost you, doesn't add anything to your cost really, but it makes a huge difference to them. So it's really valuable to them. So you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, so what, that might be really worth something. And you explore whether that's worth to them. And then you almost get to this sort of bargaining. So don't give anything away for free. You'll say, well, what if I do this, then perhaps you could do that. So always, if is your price tag here. If I think about that, would you consider not, okay, I'll do that, because they could say, yeah, thank you very much, I'll take that. So use if as a price tag and start thinking about making propositions, and you start batching things back. We've all been in that situation. We negotiate every day of our lives, whether it's just with our kids or our husbands or our wives, we negotiate all the time. So you start thinking about, if you do that, then perhaps I could do that. Or if we change this, would you consider doing that? So link and think about that. A trick you might get pulled into is like breaking everything up into little bits and agreeing bits along the way. Link everything together, because what's an easy giveaway for you might be able to use later on in the negotiation. So link all the things together, trade everything, okay? And when you get to the end of the negotiation, we've all been in the situation where you just think, oh, I'm just bloody fed up of talking about this now. I just want to go home. And you think, yes, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's great. And then if you leave a situation, you rush an end, it's like you're both left feeling a little bit uncomfortable. The buyer's left thinking, have I just been wasting my time? Or you could be left thinking, I could have got more for that. So your close, how you bring a negotiation to a close, has got to be really credible. It's got to be a win-win. Somebody's got to feel they've won something. And, there's nothing wrong in the buyer thinking he's really won you over and got loads of stuff, because you might have given a load of stuff that he really values, and it's not a lot of cost to you. He feels great. Fantastic. Job done. You've got what you want. He thinks he's won. Or I don't want to use winning, but he thinks he's got the best deal. Whatever you do, when you bring that close, you start to close the negotiation, you must confirm what you've done it. So in the days when I was a buyer, we didn't have text, we didn't have emails. Well, we did towards the end. It was like everything was done in writing. So somebody'd come in, we'd do a negotiation, they'd go away, they'd write me a letter, and I'd get it 3 days later. Everything is so much more instant now, but it's still really important to actually confirm everything you've agreed, because You might go away thinking one thing and the buyer might go away thinking another, and we know the trouble that can lead to. So negotiation is a process. It's nothing to be frightened of. You do it every day, but you can do it really well if you think about it in terms of breaking it down into steps, doing that preparation, listening, trading things. Don't give anything away for free, and remember to confirm, make sure you're both on the same plane, you're both in agreement with what you've been agreed. So next slide, please, Callum. Hints and tips for negotiation. Prepare. Know the buyer's business. You have to at least have walked around that shop or gone into a restaurant that uses their products. Listen during the negotiation, during the discussion. You learn so much more, and you'll then you start to propose those solutions and making them conditional. If is the price tag. If you, then perhaps I. Value your concessions from the buyer's point of view, and think creatively about those concessions. It might well be that you say, look, excuse me, I don't normally deliver on a Tuesday, but listen, I could deliver on a Tuesday. You might already have thought, that doesn't make any difference to me, but they might think you're making a massive concession to them, and they're going to feel good about that, and they're going to think, yeah, that's great, they're being really fair there, they're going out of their way. So think creatively, but don't give anything away for free. Always value what you've got to offer. You know, don't be saying, oh yeah, that doesn't cost me much, I'm fine, I'm happy to do that. Why would you say that? Does that make sense? Any questions on any of those things? Has anyone fallen into any of those pitfalls before? I know I have. I completely have. Sometimes I just, like, if I'm shopping, I say you negotiate and you're buying a new oven or something, and you think, oh, I want to get that cooker hood free. And you just get to a point and you think, I just can't be bothered with this. I'm just gonna, you know, we've all done that, you know.
I have a question actually. We get all the time the request for samples for the product. We are happy to give the samples for free, but there is a debate in our team whether we charge for the delivery.
For the delivery?
Yeah, because so what do you? I mean, what do you think? Is because this is the initial stage. We don't want to charge any of the charges to the customer, but at the same time, as you said, I mean, do you think we need to charge them to show them that, you know, we value our effort?
I would say no at this stage, because you're not negotiating for a listing. They're just looking at trying to understand a bit about your product. But I would make them aware of the value of that, and then you bring that into the negotiation. I think it's I mean, there's limitations here, but at the start, you're trying to get your product out there a little bit. It's a bit like building in a budget for sampling in an event or a promotion. You have to build that into your budget. That's a natural thing to expect. But I think it's not unfair to say for the buyer to understand the value of that. And maybe you need to calculate what you're willing, the price, a package of samples that you're willing to give away as that sample, and say to them, look, this is really expensive. What we do is we tend to know people want to see the quality of this, so this is what we've put together. So make it a positive that you've put something together, but they will know the value of that because you'll have explained that. Would anybody say anything different to John? Would anyone have any other advice for John?
We just recently did have to pay for samples, and at first I was a bit like, well, that's a bit cheeky, and then I thought, well, at least they know we're probably genuine, that if we didn't pay for the samples, then I probably wasn't a genuine customer. But because I did need to see the samples and check they would fit the bottles, I was happy to pay for the samples. So I guess it gives you an indication as to how genuine they are, maybe.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.